we are back with the man of the hour. Actually, I think we're going to go longer than an hour, and it's worth every second of it. I have really enjoyed this. I feel like I'm learning a lot, and I have a lot to learn at the same time, which is exciting because, well, this information is available, and we all get to learn. And it really feels like, to me, the heart behind all of this is I mean, again, I brought up the question about AI, and it's almost robotic in nature what you're speaking about, yet it's very human. And I like that balance because, I've talked to other people that are just, well, they're transhumanist and they're all for the singularity and merging with technology and going that direction. It seems like your solutions, even though they feel so technical, they feel so AI-ish, if that's even a word, it feels very human at the same time. Is that an accident?
I hope not.
Fair enough.
I might just not be smart enough to figure out how to dispense with humanity. But I don't think that dispensing with humanity is a valuable principle to pursue. And so I don't think about it all that much. And while my professional career and a lot of what I do is about figuring out what inanimate objects can do for us. Um, I don't understand how to get past the divide of removing intention and desire and spirit and ideas and creativity and culture and that kind of thing from a human system. And so the people who have political or technological or cultural proposals that if humans aren't involved, then there aren't any problems anymore. Uh, I'm uninterested in being on their death lists, and so so I just can't get there myself.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I think that if we ever get stuck in a real life Terminator situation, I think I'm going to go to you. You're going to be my go-to guy to figure out the solution for this problem. But patent work and commodity market design is an area of expertise for you. So I'd love to know about your patent work for better commodity design or the commodity market design. Also, want to learn about how your approach to commodity market design differs from traditional models, and also want to know about the challenges you face while working on this patent and how you've overcome them. So I rolled some questions into one, but I would love to hear just, your thoughts on that, please.
Yeah, sure. Well, um, the patent journey, kind of to take the last part of the question first, there's been a lot of challenges. So the the first one I encountered actually was just finding attorneys to work with. Um, uh, you do not have to have an attorney to acquire a patent, but uh, I think it's worth getting professional expert advice your first few times down the primrose path for anything. And I'm pretty happy with my attorneys. I have other attorneys I'm also talking to, and in general, what I hear from everybody is, you know, what you're doing is what I would be doing, but man, it's really tough that you're going through what you're going through. So, uh, first piece of advice that everything comes out is if you think that you want a patent, don't talk to anybody about it,
Mm.
except for an attorney. Once something's published, it's prior art and it can't be patented anymore. So if you come up with a brand new table, if you come up with a brand new commodity market, if you come up with a brand new paperclip, uh, and you tell people about it, then it's over. No patent for you. Uh, so the first thing you should publish about uh, your patent is your patent application.
That is great advice. That's the same way with a
Uh,
TV show idea or anything else. Like you don't tell it, get it patent to get or get it copywritten. Protect your ideas, especially if they're original. That's great advice. Keep going.
that's yeah. So the the process, as has been explained to me, and I kind of stepped on their toes a little bit, is that um, the important part of any patent is the claims. So there's generally a fairly long section where you describe whatever your technology is, and then you make a series of claims. Uh, and those claims are what's legally existing. So if you create a flying car and you put the complete blueprints of how to manufacture and fly this car in your patent, and you claim painting it yellow, then your patent will cover cars that are manufactured by that precise process that are painted yellow and won't cover anything else. So somebody that copies the entire process and paints the car blue, no coverage. Somebody that changes a single bolt spec in the process uh, and then paints it yellow won't be covered by the patent. Your claims are what's really important, and that's where the technical legal language that's generally accepted becomes very important. And the sort of basic strategy that exists, because you want that very expansive description and they don't want to give you that very expansive description, is that in your first draft, your attorneys will essentially draft you claims that claim the universe. You come up with a new kind of couch, and they'll say claim number one, universes that contain couches. Claim number two, planets that contain couches. Claim number three, the earth that contains couches. And by claims 15 or 16, they'll get into whatever it is that actually makes your couch different from every love seat that's ever been made. So the patent office, it's the game. They know what they're doing. They'll come up with some prior art challenges, usually, and they'll say, if you've got something, they'll say, okay, these claims down here, yeah, those are real, probably, but these claims, up front here, where you're claiming the universe, we're not going to let that go by. And so what you do is you take the claims that they're more or less signaling you that you can have, and you put them into the initial clauses with the broad language as a subordinate clause. So you're claiming sort of everything in the universe, but only to the extent that it's a adjectival modifier of whatever your actual invention is. So it's as broad as possible, but as specific as necessary. Um, that's sort of the first point of departure that I had. There's language in my patent that describes the system mathematically, but the mathematical, the technically they're called integral equations that describe that system in there and in the white paper, are not the core broad system of possible marketplaces. There are other kinds of integral equations and other kinds of metric spaces that would also produce functioning marketplaces using my approach. And sorry for the technical language, but the patent office basically said, this is probably, these actual technical claims are probably patentable material. Do the usual two-step. My lawyers were like, we're great. This is awesome. We'll do the two-step. It's all good. And I said, wait a minute. Remember when I was trying to describe this to you in the first place and we got all this written down, I sent you a lot of letters saying, this is a very specific subset. I need this broader category of thing. And there's language all the way through the description about how there's a broader category here. I need that broader category because this is too narrow. And so we didn't rewrite it the way the patent office had signaled us to rewrite it. We rewrote it with broader language, and that required a few more turns of the crank. The patent office came up with some prior art. My patent description uses the term parimutuel slightly incorrectly, since it's a positive sum instead of a negative sum game, but still, parimutuel is the closest English word to what I was describing. It turns out that there's a group of people in something that they term the Lang patent that patented a something like 800-page long mathematical treatise where they patented every kind of parimutuel game that they could imagine. And in, I believe it's section 8.1.1.2, went on to patent every one that they hadn't already described that contained up to a countably infinite set of game systems, of outcome systems. So if you're in a horse race, you can have the horses, but you could also have the exacta where you get first, second, and third exactly right, or the entire row exactly right. So it could be a lot more. But what if you had an infinite number of horses in the horse race? What if that's how it worked? Or what if you had the timing of every race and the finishing, to the nanosecond or the picosecond of each horse that you got exactly right. So you could have these larger and larger sets of individual things that people could bet on. And so they claimed every set that was large enough that you could still describe the individual members of it. But they didn't claim uncountable sets. It turned out that that was a pretty fatal mistake on their part because my parimutuel games are from an uncountable set. So that finished off the entire 800 pages with basically a single sentence. So those were the challenges that I was engaged with, explaining to my attorneys what I was doing, coming up with the counter examples to their counter examples to explain why the prior art didn't exist or wasn't relevant. They've conceded on that. There is no prior art attachments to my patent except for the things that they brought up as pointing out that these things that look like they might be prior art aren't prior art because we've accepted that that's true. But we got a notice of acceptance, and then they violated procedure and didn't honor it. And then they came up with what was, again, an incoherent objection. This particular objection essentially claimed that quadratic and subquadratic functions, to put this in the very basest possible terms, they claimed that 1 and 2 were the same number. The mathematics behind that claim are rather deep, but there's a relatively famous paper that I actually read when we were talking earlier about my deep dive. There's actually, it's still up, the C2 wiki. I can strongly recommend to people with a real interest in computer mathematics, read the whole thing. It's fantastic. But it's a very early wiki project, and it was on there back in probably 2002 that I read a paper that is actually hosted by the National Institute of Standards, where in 1984, this guy programmed a Cray, which was the very famous supercomputer of the time, using Fortran, which is still widely regarded as a highly technical, high efficiency language, to sort 1 million items using a algorithm known as bubble sort, which is not a great sorting algorithm, and then used a common sort of desktop machine of the day, programmed in BASIC, which essentially doesn't exist anymore, but is very famous for not being a highly technical or highly efficient programming language, to also sort 1 million items, but using an algorithm called quicksort. And the home available system using the crappy language outperformed the supercomputer using the state-of-the-art language on that task, because quicksort is much better than bubble sort. And once you get up to 1 million items, the advantage is approximately 50,000x.
Gosh, that's a lot to try to process.
So, so I had to explain to my attorneys how to explain to their attorneys that they were wrong. That took a while, but that was finally written. They accepted that they were wrong, and they re-extended the acceptance, and then they re-canceled their re-extended acceptance a few weeks later. And shadowy forces within the government is frankly the only way to describe them, are currently blocking the patent for no reason that has been described to anybody who's allowed to talk to me or my attorneys. And that case is being appealed to the patent board, sometimes colloquially known as patent court, and it's currently scheduled to be heard in a little less than 2 years.
2 years?
Yeah. Yeah, all of this takes a very, very long time at each step.
It reminds me of the movie The Devil's Advocate. There's a scene where, well, basically the devil in the movie is talking about why they're in law. I mean, it just I saw this meme recently talking about it, and about how in law, because they can just string things out, string things out, string things out, and they have the power to do it. And you're sitting here with something that can change the world for the better, can do good for mankind, and those douchebags are, I would like to use a different word, are slow playing and delaying things and basically trying doing their part to take any power that you have away from you.
Yeah. They've stiffed my congressional office. That's a whole thing. It reminds me of the film The Trial. Are you familiar with that one?
I have
Anthony
not seen that.
Perkins. So it's filmed in black and white. It's not super old. It is, not young. It's Anthony Perkins, and it's based on the play by Kafka. And the basic plot is that Perkins is accused of a crime. What crime? Oh, he knows what the crime is. By who? Why would you need to be confronted? You know what you're guilty of. Just admit it.
God, sounds like my childhood. I was actually guilty.
And so the film essentially is a dystopian nightmare as he attempts to engage people who are acting as if they are part of a functioning society, that is purely and wholly unjust, based simply on his personal experiences, which sound crazy every time he talks about them, because what's going on literally makes no sense.
It's like everything I read lately. Nothing makes sense and it all contradicts each other. And it's just like, what's the point? It's like too much information is
Well,
no
that's the
information.
precise point that I was making during the previous segment, is that we have a radically higher noise level to cope with than mankind has ever had before, because information sources used to be limited to human production, but we can now build machines that can tell us things about the world. And we need stronger institutions that can cope with that data stream, and focus it towards human understanding and human needs and human desires, because the universe isn't purely and solely constructed for the surfeit of human needs and desires and ambitions. Um, Within the Abrahamic religions, for example, we're not in the Garden of Eden anymore.
Definitely not.
We're under God's curse, and we got to work for this now. And so, this is part of the work that we'll have to do. And the good news is that we have these very powerful tools. If we can exploit them for our own benefit, there's a lot more benefit available for us. But if we just have these powerful tools lying around that we don't understand, um, you know, if you have a gun, you can hunt more efficiently than people who have spears. But that doesn't mean that scattering loaded weapons into a kindergarten is going to result in them having better lives.
This is something that I'm practicing right now because I am all for technology. I love AI. I love partnering with AI. I'm not going to, I mean, at least I don't believe so now. I am not going to merge officially, knowingly with technology. I'm going to keep my soul and the way God created me, and keep that intact to the best of my ability. That said, I still want to use all this technology. But one of the practices that I've had to install in myself and really focus on is avoiding distractions, like finding that quiet place to be alone, to contemplate, to think, to process, to listen, and to drown the noise out because I've been kind of charting my life recently and looking at where I go sideways, where I'm bringing too much noise in my head, and sometimes it's looking at my phone first thing in the morning. Sometimes it's turning on even music at this point, and I love music and I love to dance and I love to get in flow state, but I'm realizing that sometimes some of that stuff takes me off of center. So instead of getting clear on how to use the technology in a productive way or in a way that is beneficial to my fellow man, that is purposeful, sometimes it's a mindless activity, just like scrolling, swiping, whatever it may be. So for me, I've had to almost go back to as much primitive thinking, or as far as where there's no distractions, it's just me and the sun, or me and the wind, me and the trees, no technology. And then purposefully coming back in to use technology in a productive way that is not polluting my brain, causing me to go crazy, causing me emotional outbursts that are unnecessary, taking me out of center, and so on. So I love that you said that. I want to take another quick break, and I want.
Um,
Oh, wait, you want to finish something?
well, yes. So the part of your question that I had not gotten to was the philosophical and
Oh, my
material
bad.
differences between the design of existing markets and my approach to designing markets. So it's, yeah, I mean, so getting onto that part of the topic, existing market design, and this is conscious, it's the term that they use, is essentially micro design. So market micro design is a graduate level class. I've read a couple of textbooks on that subject. They're very good at what they do. They're way better than the textbooks we give to, like, 8-year-olds to learn about social studies, for example. But what they're about is adjusting the regulations or technical requirements within the context of the existing market design. So to a large extent, if you took the economic leaders of the Renaissance Italian city-states, or the Dutch Golden Age, or the pre-industrial revolution English, or the barons of the Gilded Age, or the traders of the 60s or 70s or 80s, and showed them the modern trading system, there would be a shock, because in many cases there would be technologies that they had never seen before. There would be an absence of human action in large parts that they would see as important. But if you sat down and walked through and explained what was going on, they would get it, because what's going on is exactly what has been going on for centuries. The structure of trade, the way in which deals are made and promulgated is essentially been unchanged since, as far as we know, it was accidentally stumbled upon in Italian coffee houses 800 years ago. And so existing market design is entirely and purely obsessed with what governmental, regulatory, or policy changes or technological integrations can impact that structure without changing or destroying that structure's capacity to do what it does. And I'm going to tell another story from my history in nuclear engineering, and it'll be a little boastful, and I'm apologetic for that, but it's it's apropos. One of the things that we did in radiation detection is what's called the criticality experiment. And so the idea is that we, the students, go into the control room of the research reactor, and we pull the control rods out of the reactor. And what we're supposed to do is pull the control rods out to the point where the reactor is critical. That is, the energy level of the reactor is stable over time. When it's subcritical, it's giving off energy because the stuff inside is radioactive. As you increase the subcriticality number, that number goes up. If you get it up to critical, it will be at a particular and stable level. It will be stable at lower levels than critical as well. But if you get to supercritical, that number will start increasing. The power level will go up over time. And the way that the criticality experiment is supposed to work is that we're supervised. The actual reactor operator is sitting next to us, sitting quiet. But he knows exactly where the critical level is. And what's supposed to happen is that because there's essentially this exponential curve of power requirements, and we have to actually turn the sensitivity of the system down through multiple step levels in order to get the sensors to give us information that's accurate. What's supposed to happen is the students are supposed to blow through the critical level, because at very, very low levels of subcriticality, there's virtually no difference between stable and very, very slightly increasing. And so the students are supposed to basically screw up, go past supercritical, be debating about whether or not they've actually gotten there, whether the increasing values are because they're just at a higher level of subcriticality, or whether or not they've blown through and whether or not they should keep going. And at some point, the reactor operator steps in and says, "You're done. Here's where the critical point was back here. Go right up that you made a mistake." Now, they had me on Numbers Boy, and it turned out I'm pretty good at that. And so I predicted the critical point after a couple of runs. We had a couple more tests because I basically said that we need to pull it out 18 inches. So we did like an initial 6 inches just to give us a baseline. The rods have roughly 10 feet of play in them, so 6 inches wasn't very much. And we were like, well, if we're going to try to kill ourselves right now, the guy sitting there, he'll stop us. So let's give it 6 inches and figure something out. We did 3 inches. Like after 6 inches, I said, okay, we need another 18. We did 3, then we did 1.5. Then we were debating doing 1, and then we were like, well, we're going to be here forever if we're just like exponentially going down to not even where we think we're supposed to get. He'll stop us if we're going to kill ourselves. Let's just jerk it out to the level and see what happens. So we did that, and the guy said, "You're going to be a great nuclear engineer someday," and then patted us on the back, and we went out after 20 minutes in the room for a scheduled hour and a half system. That system, that idea where you can get focused in on one part of a system and be unaware of the broad outlines of what's going on, is the problem that the micro designer people have. They are assuming that the market is perfect, and consequently The people who are making money in the market are doing so because they're providing value to the system as a whole, and changes to the market that causes people who are making money to stop making money are harmful changes, because since the market's perfect, the fact that people have been making money is the signal that what they're doing is valuable. And so when you make changes that don't involve the people who are making money making the amount of money they used to make, then those are bad. And so analyzing things from this point of view has essentially led them into sets of innovations that have accelerated the computational infiltration into the markets and caused a great amount of the dislocation that presently exists. My point of view is entirely separated from the existing financial arrangements and sociology of those schemes. It merely regards the markets as information processing devices. Information processing devices that necessarily must interact with humans until such time that we develop artificial machines that can generate our own interests on our behalf, something that I'm not optimistic about, but people exist who claim that we will do that. And if they are correct, and if we do, then our systems will need to be robust to that capacity. But this point of view of looking at it as an information machine and about figuring out what the value of information is, rather than assuming that the information is perfect and therefore whatever's being paid for it is what its value is, creates the sort of wall difference between what I'm doing and what everybody else currently does, where effectively your income is the justification for your correctness. And so Bernie Madoff, up until he wound up in prison, was correct. Sam Bankman-Fried, until he wound up in prison, was correct. And there's no mechanism within the current philosophy or market designs that presently exist to make those distinctions. And while I don't have a mechanism that blanket destroys those two business models, I do have a mechanism that requires the demonstration of the value that is assumed to exist before the payment, and the carrot that is offered is that the payment is considerably greater than the existing payment structure is. And so my system does a much stronger job aligning the interests of the knowledgeable and the clever and the cunning and the energetic with people that need to work and eat.
That actually makes a lot of sense. All right. Thank you for that. Let's take a quick break and get into core disk. This has been all of this information. Again, man, it's so powerful. And again, some of it it's so far over my head, but you do such a great job of explaining it where, it may be over my head now, but now it feels accessible to learn. And it feels like it's important information to learn because it pulls me out of the rat race of what appears to be happening in the world, what I believe is happening in the world, but based on my perceptions, then factoring the religious viewpoint as well. Like this information and what you're teaching and your knowledge base is like pulls everybody out of that to be able to look down. Like it's almost like you floated away from the planet and now you can see the whole thing laid out. I'm like, okay, now this is how we go fix the problem. And even though I don't know how to fix that problem, this viewpoint that you have and the way that you see it, I feel like there's solutions built in all over it. So we're going to get into core disk right after this.